Hi, this is Dr. Quevedo. Thank you for watching. In this video, we will begin with the design of a database that we're going to use during our course to illustrate basic concepts of a database system. Specifically in this video, we will begin with the design of an ER diagram that in the next section we will use to actually design the schema. Now, be sure that you have access to the document that now we show here, the document that says the Quevedo Political Party Example Part 1. So I'm going to make a reference to this document. So now you can see that in the instructions, it says that we had to design the ER diagram. And this is the first piece of information that we have about a project. So we have our client, in this case, is a political party, and the political party is the Quevedo party. So now we have some type of interaction with our client, and we somehow compile some of the requirements that we need for the database system, and that's what we have in this document. So what we will do now is go over those requirements. I think I listed as 9 requirements. And what we need to be checking, and this is one of the important goals in the design of the ER. So we need to be able to identify entities and relationships. So we need to be sure that we understand the difference between those and then the attributes. If you also go back and look at the instructions, it says that we had to find and try to match as much information as possible from there into the ER diagram. However, the ER diagram is going to have some limitations in the sense that there will be some information that we're not going to be able to describe in the diagram. However, that doesn't mean that we're not going to use that as part of the design. So we're just going to take some notes that information needs to be implemented in later steps of the design. Okay, so let's start by looking at requirement number 1. In requirement number 1, we see that there is a description of member. And then in member, it says that it has to have a social security number, that it has to have a name, an address, and a phone number. By just reading that description with attributes, we identify members as an entity. And that's the steps that we have to do in the diagram. So we need to identify in each of the requirements if this is an entity or a relationship. So the first part of the paragraph is giving me a list of attributes that we need to record for each of the members. So we have a name. I'm going to underline name here in that paragraph. And then I see that there is a name. I circle name, age, address, phone number. So those ones that I circle, those will be 4 attributes that I just identify for a member. Now, there is also an email, and then I need to know if they have registered if they are registered voted. And then in that case, I got information about the values of the attributes for that entity, which I didn't have for name and age. In this case, I had true or false, which is a requirement that we're not going to be able to store initially in the diagram. Now, membership type also has possible values. There is a single or group. We're not going to be able to store that information initially, but we need that information in the database because it's a requirement for the client. We cannot go and create a database that is not meeting the requirements. So in the initial part, we need to take a note about that this is not in there. Now, there is a second sentence in this paragraph that talks about that the group memberships, as an example of family, they have to have the same email, address, and phone number, which is going to give a restriction on the membership type, which means that if we have a member that belongs to a group, everybody in that group has to have the same address, phone number, and the same email. Okay, so then we will use, and that's what it says here, that we will use the email to identify then the address and phone numbers for the ones that belong to a group. And also we're going to identify the type of membership. Okay, once we have all that information, the main thing that we got from this paragraph is that this is a entity, member. So we need to have then members, and I know that I have some attributes that I will use to identify them. So one of them is the SSN, which is Social Security number. So we put that in an ellipse. Then I have an H. We have an address, a phone number, and an email. But if we remember, those three attributes will be linked with the type of membership. So I'm not going to use those here now. I'm going to say now status. Now, because the group membership that we haven't included is going to be linked to the phone number. So now, and the email. So then here we're going to have another entity set that will be giving the description of a membership type. So here we're going to say membership. Maybe it's a good name. Between members and membership, there is a relationship. So I'm going to use a diamond that is going to say has, and then from here to here, we're going to say that several members from here, so we're going to put a M for many, will belong to a specific group in the membership. And in that specific group, they will have an email, they will have also an address, and a phone number. And you go back and read the paragraph, we need to be sure that every single attribute that is listed to identify a member is there, and which let's go and check again. So Social Security is in there, name is there. Now I'm reading on the next part that says age. Wait, name is not in here. So here, found something missing. So here let's put name. I say it is and it isn't, name. Okay, good that I was checking. So name is there now. Name, age, address, phone number. Now email is in the membership type. And then the status, good. So we got all the information. So look at how the second paragraph, the second sentence in this paragraph help us to identify the membership is actually going to be a relationship. So later, if we need to identify members that belongs to the same group, we're going to have to derive the information from the membership set. Now let's look at requirement number 2. For the requirement number 2, it talks about an election. Now, an election, if we read that paragraph, we see that there are 4 attributes because it says an election in which the Quevedo political party participates has a unique identification. So the unique identification is an attribute of an election. It has a date. That's another attribute, which with those 2 attributes by itself, we can see that an election is also an entity because we got attributes that uniquely identify an election. Now for election type, we have possible values for the domain, what we call the domain, which is local, county, state, federal, special. Finally, we have another attribute that is position, and position can be, for example, president or a governor, and then a location. So it looks then that we have here 4 attributes. I'm just going to circle the attributes that I have here. I'm going to circle unique identification, election date, type is number 3, and position is 4, and location is actually 5. So there are 5. So now I need to find a space in wherever I'm going to be drawing for my third rectangle, which is my entity. So in this case will be election. So I'm going to have a place in which I'm going to have the elections, and the elections will be identified by an ID. So here we're going to circle this. We have a date, type, location. Missing. Position is missing. So we need to have that here. Now, in my diagram, you see none of the attributes like in the previous example, they are derived or they are dependent on other attributes like we have in the previous one. So this was a little easier. Now, something else that we haven't done, and this is important. Look at that. It says unique identification. In each one of the entity sets, we need to identify an attribute of a set of attributes that will uniquely identify the other elements from that set. So then the key there that says unique identification is saying that, oh, this can be a key. For that, what we will do is we'll underline. So I'm going to underline ID for this entity. And then going back to members. In members, we did not have the keyword unique, but we have an attribute that is social security number. So we can use additional information that we know about social security that is a unique number assigned to a person. So that can be used as a key for the member entity set. So I will underline SSN for social security number. Going to membership. In membership, again, it wasn't anything that was specified as being unique. But if you remember in the description, we say something about that, oh, we could use the email to identify. So then let's use the email to identify the membership, because remember, everybody in that group will have the same email address. So by going with that email address, I will be able to identify the phone number of the members. And now this will also help me to identify the membership type, because if I have multiple people that has the same email address, that means they belong to a group membership. Okay, now let's go and look at number 3. Okay, so far we have identified 3 entity sets, which are members, elections, and membership. Remember that the identification came from the description, that they were described by a set of attributes. Now, if we look in the requirements for number 3 and the requirements for number 4, that is the one that I'm showing here. In number 3, it says about a sponsor, and it's giving a description again about a sponsor. And the description, it says that it's somebody that is going to assist financially the Quevedo political party, and it has a unique identification. That unique identification is going to help me with the describing of the sponsor, and then a name, an organization, a phone number. And again, for the organization type, I have values for the domain. Remember that we don't have a way of record that in the ER diagram right now. So the possible values that says there is non-profit and for-profit. So then a sponsor will also be an entity set. And number 4, we also have a description. The description here is for an incident. It says each political incident affecting the Quevedo party is recorded with a unique identification. So then this is an entity. We have an identification for an incident. We will have a title, which will be another attribute. We will have a date and 1 or more consequences. The 1 or more consequences for the attribute is describing that this will have multi-values. So it will be possible more. So that will be a type of attribute that we have not implemented yet in my diagram. So we have sponsors, and we identify that as an entity set identification. So now, remember that what I'm doing here too is giving names, and the names are very similar to the attributes, the ones that are in the description of the requirements. But I mean, I can make changes to the names or whatever I consider that could be more meaningful, and that's up to you, because I mean, eventually those will be the names of the columns. So I have previously used ID for elections, and then here I'm going to use an ID for identifying a sponsor. I can add something like SID for me to say, well, it's a sponsor identification. Because of the keyword that is unique, I will underline, because I will say this will be a good primary key for this entity set. And then we also had the name. So I'm going to do that. And then I'm also drawing the organization type. So what type of organization is the one that is sponsored? So there is next attribute. And the last one is the phone number of the sponsors. Okay, now number 4, we talk about incidents there. So let's draw another rectangle because we say that we're describing an incident, and the description will be with a unique identification number. Again, I'm okay if I do the ID, or maybe if I do IID. So, I mean, it's not a requirement. I mean, later we can make a distinctions of the different type of IDs for the objects. I'm just trying not to use the same one, so it's not a confusion there. So there is unit identification, so there will be a title for that incident. Remember, these are requirements from the client, because maybe some of the attributes, maybe you as the designer says, oh, maybe this doesn't make sense, or this rule is not appropriate. It's not whatever we think. It's what the client is telling us. So it says that we need to have a title. So the incident has to have a title. And then a description. And the last one is the consequences. Now, I just say that the consequences here it says one or more. And what we study prior to the design of the diagram is that the attributes that we have has just one single value. But in this case, our client says that, well, we're going to have one or more consequences. I had to have some type of notation to say that this attribute will have to have multiple values. So then here I'm going to have that these are consequences. If I just circle like that, there is not difference with the other attributes that I have indicated in the rest of the diagram. So here I'm going to have to do an additional ellipse. So enclosing that, there is a double ellipse around the consequences. And that indicates that this is a multi-value attributes. Now, let's see the next requirement. So far, you have noticed 1, 2, 3, 4, they were mainly entity sets. They were the definitions of entity sets. So let's see what happens on 5 and 6. So I see here number 5. Number 5, it says member. It's talking about a member. So here is an important key just by reading that section, because I already described members. So it's talking about members. And then it says each member might participate as candidate in one or more elections. That line by itself is mentioning 2 entity sets. So I will circle the names. This is the part that is telling me that there is a relationship. I don't need to be worrying about the description, because we already established member and elections as entity sets. Now we're talking about 2 of them. That means there's a relationship. There is some type of relationship between a member and an election. And we need to specify a name. So it says here that they may participate as a candidate. Now there is a diamond. The connection between a rectangle and another rectangle cannot be a direct line. It has to be with a diamond, and the diamond describes a relationship. Now, the relationship has to have some type of cardinality, which is either 1-to-1, 1-to-many, or many-to-many. And here it specifies that as a candidate in one or more elections. So then a member here can participate, and the M in this side will tell me can be many elections. But an election cannot have more than one candidate. Here, there is something interesting here, because the next line in requirement number 5, it says that the participation will have a single result, which is either winning or losing the election. Now, that's an attribute that is describing what happens with that relationship. Now, a very common mistake here will say, well, I had to record the result, and then maybe because it's an election, maybe that is an attribute from an election. However, the idea here is the result is associated with the relationship of the candidate and the election. So in this case, and that's what this makes interesting, so this diamond will have an attribute which is a result. So when they participate, they will also have some type of attribute which is the candidate. On number 6, we see that we talk about sponsor. So we say, by reading the description on number 6, it says each sponsor. Just by reading that, I said, wait, I already have information about a sponsor. So without reading the rest and making a prediction, this has to be some type of relationship, because we already established this, or we identified this as an entity set. So it says, a sponsor might sponsor several elections. Now, there, another entity, which is elections. So then, For sure, I'm saying, no, well, sponsors that is an entity and elections that is an entity, they have a relationship. So then I had to select a name. So here will be the diamond. So there will be somebody from here that will sponsor an election from there. And then it says each sponsor might sponsor several elections, and each election may have multiple sponsors. So in this case, the cardinality from the description that we have there, it has a many to many. So in one side of the drawing, what I'm putting is the letter M, and in the other side, I put it the N. But just that's the terminology that we use when it's many to many. We don't use MM. It's just to distinguish that there are two possible values there. And then the second line, it talks about each sponsorship of a given election consists in one or more monetary amounts. Again, it's describing the relationship between the sponsor and the election. It's another attribute that says, let's call that amount. The sponsorship of a given election, that's the second line. That's something else that we need to consider. Consists in one or more amounts. So then that one or more will also make a distinction that when they do a contribution, it's not a one-time contribution. So maybe they can have multiple contributions to that election. So that will also qualify the amount attributed in the relationship to be multi-value. So let's add another ellipse there to indicate that this is a multi-value attribute that you can read. Otherwise, when we do the design, we will not accept an additional contribution from the same sponsor for that election. So that's important to have in there. Now, for the next one, that is the number 7. Number 7, it says each member of the Quevedo party. So again, we're talking about members. Remember, members is already in the diagram. Could be involved in one or more political incidents. So now incidents is also already there. So then it's talking about an involvement. So then there is a relationship here between members and incidents. We can call that involved. So a member can be involved in an incident. And then their involvement could be classified as direct or indirect. Again, it's given an attribute, a qualification to that relationship. Then, in this case, here we can say type of involvement as part of an attribute in that relationship. And then it says incidents must involve one or more members. Okay, and then member can be involved in one or more political incidents. I'm reading that part to make a conclusion about the cardinality. This is one to one, one to many, or many to many. So in this case, what I see is many to many, because the member can be involved in multiple incidents. There can be multiple members in the same type of incident. But there is something else here that is getting my attention. The part that says while incidents must, you see, I'm going to underline that part. It says must involve. If in my database in the future, I'm going to have to record an incident, I have to have somebody participated. So I have to require the participation. The way in which I do that in the diagram is adding another line here. So here having the double line means total participation. That means the incidents had to participate in there. When we have a single line, that's optional participation. And look at this. If we go in the diagram, for example, between members and election, there is a single line. The single line means, well, members had the option to participate as a candidate in an election. If I change that single line between members and candidate and I put double line, then that's a requirement. Every member that is in that set has to participate as a candidate. So that's the difference between the single line and the double line. Good, so I'm glad that we noticed that must involve, because that will imply that that's a double line there. Number 8 will be now, each member could be the manager of at most one election. One more time, member and election. So that means that there is a relationship between a member and an election, because we have already a relationship between members and election, which was candidate. That doesn't mean that that will be the only possible way that a member can participate in an election. So another way you participating that is here is being the participant as a manager. So then I'm going to add an additional diamond that can be manager. And then I'm going to draw a line from manager to election and members. Now, to be done with that membership, remember we need to find the cardinality for this binary relationship. So it says each member could be the manager of at most one. So it's just one, and each election cannot have more than one manager. So then here, the restriction is that it has to be one and one relationship. So it's the one, I mean, it's just the one, I mean, and remember that this has a meaning because then nobody else can be the manager and the election can only have one member as the manager. The last requirement talks about acting members. So in this case, it's giving some type of adjective or classification to a member. A member is active if it's older than 70 and is also a registered vote. So this sounds like kind of like a subset of the set members. The members, we already had information about the age, and we also had information about being registered voters. So now that requirement number 9, we're not going to include it in the ER diagram. That's something else that we're going to implement later. So right now we're done with the diagram. So let's see what was missing. Let's just remember what was missing. The information that is missing for the future design is the domain values of some of the attributes. Like for example, in a status in members, there was a possibility of being true and false. We don't have that captured in the diagram. And the same for all other attributes in which we're giving examples of possible domains. That information is missing. So that's the information that is missing. And the other requirement that is missing here is number 9. So number 9, we don't have it here. So that's something else that we need to remember for when we finalize the database, that information is not included in the diagram. Okay, something else that we need to remember from this activity today, the way that we make the distinction between an entity and a relationship. Okay, how is that an entity said? We have some attributes that do the description, and a relationship, it will be the involvement of two entity sets there. And there were 2 types of attributes that we were discussing here, single and multi-value. We got 2 examples of multi-value attributes. So we will continue with the transformation of this diagram in a future video. Thank you.